So in this video I'm going to be breaking down why Manchester United's defensive shape looked quite unusual in this game, setting up in a 5-1-4 at times, whilst also discussing the new potential fullback role in football and why teams are starting to use what I would call an inside receiver. But before that, for cheap good quality football jerseys, retro jerseys and tracksuits, go over to www.jerseyfifa.com, a link will be left in the description, and use code ATLANTISFOOTBALL to get 5% off. So from the start of the game, what we saw when the ball was in Chelsea's defensive third was that United would sit in a 4-2-4 shape, with Fred pushing up ahead of the midfield line to man press Jorginho in Chelsea's deep double pivot in their 3-4-2-1 possession shape. United's frontline press sat incredibly narrow, with the two wide attackers, Rashford and Sancho, positioned so that they could cut off the passing lanes into this sort of area, which will be highlighted by the yellow rectangle, and this would instead force Chelsea around that narrow front four, forcing them wide, which gives United more time to shift across and close up the spaces between the lines and stop Chelsea progressing the ball through the centre of the pitch. This defensive tactic was very impressive, whether it was thought of by Carrick solely or under Rangnick's influence. Against Liverpool, the main problem with United's press was that the frontline press was far too aggressive and far too early for the whole shape to follow, and so the press was not coordinated, leaving massive gaps in the press between the front, midfield and defensive lines, which allowed Liverpool to easily play around the pressure and open United up. When Chelsea progressed the ball into United's half, we would see United's 4-2-4 shape drop back into almost a 5-2-3 shape, as McTominay had been instructed to follow Callum Hudson-Odoi's movements forward, often dragging him backwards into the defensive line. When the ball was on the opposite flank, the wide attacker in the front three, Rashford or Sancho, would shift infield, creating a narrow box shape and thereby continuing to close off Chelsea's passes into midfield. Before I go any further, I am going to start a Patreon on the 1st of December. It will likely be around £5, $6 a month, and for that you will get an extra Manchester United video each week, as well as a video on a topic that patrons will get to vote on. So I may do things like analyse in past games from previous years that you would like to see, or other topics as well. And you'll also get a weekly newsletter with me discussing some things across the Premier League and across Europe that I'm maybe not able to make videos about. So if you want those three things each week, be sure to sign up for my Patreon when it does launch, as it will help support this channel and help me put out more videos on YouTube each week as well. I haven't launched it yet, as you do get charged on the 1st of every month, so I will be launching it on December the 1st, which is this Wednesday, so you do get maximum value for your money. In possession, we would see that Chelsea use a 3-2-4-1 shape that usually comes with the wing-backs pushing up the pitch, providing the advance width, and the attackers in behind Werner moving infield into the half space. However, over the last few weeks, and in this game particularly, we saw Ziyech and Hudson-Odoi on occasion pull out wide, and it was a role of the wing-back, either James on the right side or Alonso on the left side, to make a diagonal run into the half space on the inside of that four between the lines. This is a role we have seen developing in football this season. We've seen Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool being instructed to push up between the lines on the inside of Mohamed Salah, and at Ajax we've seen Ten Hag instructing Mazraoui to do the same on Ajax's right side, with Antony holding the width on the outside of him. I did do a full video looking at how Erik Ten Hag could use the same tactic with Manchester United, so check that out after this video. It will be linked in the description below. This isn't really what you would call an inverted fullback, as generally an inverted fullback will move inside but remain in a relatively deep position in front of the opposition's midfield line rather than in behind it, taking up the position more of a conventional defensive midfielder than an attacking midfielder, and this is what we see Guardiola do with the likes of Cancelo and Walcott. The inverted fullback role relies on the player having the vision and passing ability to work the ball into players between the lines, playing more as a quarterback if you like, whereas in the case of Reece James in this game, he isn't the player picking up the ball in deep positions and looking to progress it forward. That was Chalobah and Rudiger, the two wide centre backs. If I had to give this role a name, it would probably be an inside receiver, as James is sitting on the inside of Ziyech on the outside, and the main point of this positioning is to receive the ball in behind Fred and Matic, which is why I think the name inside receiver fits. Anyway, both Mazraoui and Trent are right backs playing in a back four, whilst Alonso and James are wing backs playing in a back five, but in possession they all do similar things in terms of their movement forward. This is likely being introduced into football by coaches, as opposition sides have become too familiar with the usual movement of the wide players drifting inside into the half space whilst the fullbacks overlap outside. It's become easy to instruct the opposition left back to move inside with a player like Ziyech and have the midfielder on the outside track Reece James's run down the line, but now with the variety of movement, it's forcing the left back to hold a wider position and putting the wide attacker in a uncomfortable position, with him not knowing whether to drop deep into this space to cover the run or to hold his position higher up. However, with United using a man-to-man defensive shape in the middle third, this meant that often, rather than maintaining their zonal position in the midfield line, either side of Matic, Fred and McTominay were either drawn higher up the pitch with Fred pressuring Jorginho, or into the back line with McTominay following Callum Hudson-Odoi. Fred, however, did a good job of positioning himself in a way that would cut off the passing lane into Reece James and behind him, but still sit high enough up the pitch to apply the pressure to Jorginho if the ball went into him. This meant that Manchester United were relatively effective at stopping Chelsea being able to work the ball into the likes of Alonso, Reece James, Hakim Ziyech and Callum Hudson-Odoi between the lines, and instead forced Chelsea out to the flanks. This generally is a tactic of a side that sees there being less threat from the flanks than they do from in front of the back line, and Wan-Bissaka and Telles did a pretty good job of defending in these situations, and with McTominay dropping into that back line and him and Bailly picking up the two, what I would call inside receivers, United were able to keep their fullbacks wider to reduce the space that the wide players had, and then follow the underlapping runs in behind the fullback. But it was arguably in the first 10 minutes when Chelsea created their best chance, and it came from direct means. Thiago Silva launched a long ball from inside his own defensive third, looking to utilise the aerial ability of Alonso against Wan-Bissaka. Alonso flicked the ball on, with McTominay allowing Hudson-Odoi to run off the back of him, and Lindelof completely overcommitting in the challenge, with not enough assertiveness in trying to get the ball, and because of Bailly not coming across quickly enough, Hudson-Odoi was able to race through into a one-on-one position, and but from a tremendous save from David De Gea, Chelsea would have had the lead. This was a great example of using what I would call a wide target man, as with Marcos Alonso, Chelsea can push him forward from that left wing back position into an advanced position, and because of his aerial ability stemming from his size and ability to attack the ball, Chelsea can use someone like Thiago Silva's long passing ability to progress the ball quickly from back to front, giving United little time to adjust, and therefore utilising a tall fullback like Germany did with Robin Gosens, pushing him forward down their left side, and using his aerial ability, a side can move the attack into the final third a lot quicker with one vertical pass. In possession, United would fall into a 2-5-3 shape, with Nemanja Matic often dropping into the back line as United pushed out of their box, but United didn't really have sustained periods of possession. Their best way of creating chances, unsurprisingly, came from quick transition in attacks, and we did see Jadon Sancho providing the runs in behind the high Chelsea back line quite frequently, almost getting into a one-on-one position after a diagonal run in between Rudiger and Alonso and receiving Fred's fantastic lofted pass. But Chelsea pressed Manchester United so effectively that they controlled the whole first half, recorded an XG of 0.78 whilst United went into the break with an XG of just 0.01. We saw Chelsea, like United, pressing man-to-man, but Tuchel's side pressed a lot more aggressively and higher up the pitch, pressing in what resembled a 4-4-2 shape as Hudson-Odoi dropped to press Wan-Bissaka, Werner and Ziyech pressed the two United centre-backs, and Reece James also pushed up from wing-back position to apply the pressure to Alex Telles. Chelsea's press was coordinated and assertive and stopped United playing out of their defensive third. So certainly United were poor going forward, which is to be expected with the players not really having set patterns and movements in attack with everyone on the same wavelength, and so United often struggled to link the attack, not being able to push the attack into Chelsea's half. But this is something I expect Rangnick to improve, and with him training the likes of McTominay, Fred and Matic to play quick vertical passes when there is a turnover, I do expect him to have United also pressing maybe 15 to 20 yards higher up the pitch as well. But for what United lacked offensively, defensively they were much improved from previous weeks, and this was largely because of Carrick's man-to-man pressing instructions for Fred and McTominay, as both players had the willingness to either press or mark a player in a deeper position, and this enabled United to block off passes into the central midfield, stop players finding space between the lines, and creating a back five at times to deal with the width from Chelsea's wide players, whilst also being narrow enough to pick up Chelsea's free players in central attacking positions. Fred played the role of a pressing central midfielder, which does get the best out of him because it enables him to use his pressing abilities to reduce the impact of one of the opposition's deep line creators, which in this game was either Jorginho or Loftus-Cheek, and Carrick's use of McTominay also got the best out of him as he was almost a half centre back, as he has decent defensive ability when playing in a back five, largely coming from his experience playing as a wide centre back in a back five for Scotland, and so McTominay was able to do a very good job of shutting Hudson-Odoi out of the game, whether that being closing off his space in behind the midfield or following him into the channel. channels. Now both of the goals in this game came from individual rather than systemic mistakes. United's was a pretty simple goal, but it did showcase a new side to this United side. The ball got cleared from United's box after a Chelsea corner. Jorginho was the only Chelsea player around the centre circle, and as the ball fell from the sky, you can see that Rashford and Sancho have sprinted to apply the pressure, and it paid off as Sancho with such elegance glided past Jorginho's tackle after the Italian's poor touch, and Sancho's finish to fake a pass to Rashford, wrong footing Mendy, and then passing the ball in the near bottom corner was all the signs of a player still confident despite a poor start to the season. Many players in this sort of situation who had been under the sort of criticism that Sancho has been under in the last few weeks would have opted to lay the ball to Rashford for the finish, as arguably when players are in a bad spell of form, which Sancho was prior to the Villarreal game, it can be worse to miss that sort of opportunity than it would be good to score, and so many players would have taken the easier option, but Sancho showed his confidence that we saw in front of goal during his time at Borussia Dortmund. I may do a video analysing what Manchester United need to do to get the best out of Sancho, so if you want to see that video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get notified when I upload a video. Jorginho did make up for his mistake by scoring the penalty to equalise the game after Wan-Bissaka's rash kick out against Thiago Silva, and despite Wan-Bissaka showing his defensive strengths in this game, which was his blocking and tackling, as he did make a vital block after Werner spun Lindelof, and but for the right back would have likely scored, Wan-Bissaka is far too reckless here. He has to be more aware of players around him, but he, like Eric Bailly, has a tendency to be reckless when the ball is around their feet in the box. Ronaldo did come on in the 65th minute, and it did give us a subtle idea as to how he may be used under Rangnick. He came on for Sancho with Rashford going on to the right side, and Ronaldo essentially playing as a left-sided forward in a front three. Now there has been a lot of debate around whether Ronaldo will suit Rangnick's style of play, and I do see him being a starter, as his finishing ability alone is going to win United a lot of games, and he can still perform a valuable role in the press, as the counter or Gegen press as it's known doesn't solely focus on aggressive pressuring, but also on body positioning to cut off a pass and almost shrink the pitch, and I do think that Ronaldo does have the willingness to make rapid movements to close down players in the final third, but it's more his ability to make those vertical movements up and down the channels or horizontally across the pitch when in the middle third, but certainly for these short intense pressures, I think Ronaldo will be able to perform this role. Overall, whilst Chelsea did end the game with an XG of 2.35 to United 0.56, I did think that Carrick's side were much improved defensively, with them being a lot more coordinated in the press and using a compact, narrow, Rangnick-esque shape which worked well to close down the space between the lines. I thought Fred did a very good job of applying pressure high up the pitch to Jorginho, whilst also cutting off the passing lane into Reece James, who was making that inside run into the half space, really starting to be the front runner for this new inside receiver role that we have begun to see a lot of fullbacks across Europe being used in. So thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that video, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like and click the bell for notifications. Also go to the description to check out some of my other videos, like my video on how Erik ten Hag would set up Manchester United and what Ralf Rangnick will bring to Manchester United as well. Both of those videos will be linked below, and be sure to check out my Patreon to help support the channel as well.